There was a mess in Dallas yesterday. Just an absolute mess. Beautiful weather, but a mess nonetheless. Oklahoma 53, Texas 45. This one goes to 4 overtimes. There was a period of yesterday. If you watched the early games and then that overlap window where the early games are wrapping up and then the early games are starting, or the mid-afternoon games are starting, you got Oklahoma 53 over Texas 45, and you got that in 4 overtimes. You got other games starting, and it was crazy for about an hour stretch there. There was zero skill, as we said last week, in ever attempting to predict this. And there was already very little skill in predicting these games, but we didn't think there was any skill in this, and we got exactly what we thought we would get. We had both teams with over 100 yards in total penalties. I think we had, 6 combined turnovers. It was just everything that you would think would go wrong went wrong. Oklahoma ended up winning the game after benching their starting quarterback midway through the first half. So everything that could go wrong, everything that would happen in a game like this ended up happening. Oklahoma, man. I mean, they turned it over 3 times early. They, as I said, bench Spencer Rattler. And that's who won the game, just to give you an idea of how crazy this one was. The Texas, here's what's just totally depressing. If I'm a Texas fan, I don't know how you guys do it. I really don't. I feel so bad, and this is not a fan base that many people take much pity on, but I don't know how you guys do it. Your defense did everything, largely, that you could ask of them yesterday, and yet it's just offense is not there. Just not there. You got a quarterback with years under his belt now, and this is not Ellinger's fault by any stretch, don't get me wrong. I'm shocked at how ineffective their run game is. Outside of him, Ellinger had, I can't remember how many, he had a bulk of their rushing yards because outside of him, they had 11 carries for 29 yards. You're talking about a guy having to shoulder the load himself. And as a result, I mean, even some subpar defenses can limit you at times. And they had a long string of 3-and-outs consecutively, and yet they're sitting there with all the experience at quarterback against a first-year starter who's been benched and already came back in the game, and yet they're the ones having to play catch-up late in the game. Very uninspired. It's just for another week in a row, they look so ill-prepared. At times, they just look lifeless. I don't know how that's possible in this game. I don't know how it's possible, period, but much less in this game. Mistakes all over the place. You know what it's a reflection on. You know I'm not in the business of calling for folks' jobs on this show. I don't like doing that. But, I mean, it's obvious to you and I who that's a reflection on. So, Oklahoma, if I'm a Sooner fan, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say here. If I'm in a rebuilding year and I get this win in a rebuilding year, it makes me go back to, I remember when Tuberville was at Auburn. And Auburn wasn't winning national titles. I mean, they weren't really even contending for national titles, but they were beating Alabama every year. Now, that's not Oklahoma. Oklahoma's been in the playoff every year under Riley. But in your down year, if you still get a win over Texas, and they got all the experience at quarterback, they got every reason that they should be beating you that year, things aren't all that bad. I mean, I'd like to do a split, and I can't. I don't know why I say I'd like to. I'd love to do a split. Take the very moment in time that Rattler got benched yesterday and then draw a line in the sand and do pre-benching and post-benching and just watch how the rest of his season plays out. And I guarantee you that'll be looked at as some seminal moment, and that was the Rubicon. And once he crossed that, then everything sort of settled into him and the tumblers fell into place and he figured out how to play quarterback and not turn the ball over. But to go back to Texas, before we move on here, I know there's been a lot of talk over really the last several weeks, but really now, because this was the one. I told you, I thought Texas had to have this one. I thought Oklahoma wanted to have it. There was a difference to me, and Texas did not get what I thought they had to have. Well, you can't be saying someone has to have something, and then they don't get it, and you come back on the air the next night and you say, all right, on to the next one. Not that I'm calling for anything to happen this week, but I just take you back. Like, I think some things got decided yesterday. I don't think those things will happen tomorrow or the next day, but I think some things got decided because I want to take you back as we move on here to the offseason when we heard the staff over at Horns 24/7. They interviewed Chris Del Conte, who is the athletic director at Texas. And what I took from that, it's still available, you can still go watch this for yourself. What I took from their conversation with him was he was essentially telling you there's a big difference in us needing to build the aircraft versus us having the aircraft built and just needing to find the right pilot. Because right now, they're doing everything else they need to do out there. They got the entire infrastructure in place, and that's like having the plane built. If you don't have the pilot in place, relatively speaking, it's a lot easier to just go find a new pilot. And your big, pretty, brand new, sparkly plane, every pilot worth their salt wants to fly it. That's where I think Texas football is right now.